Before we start with this, we're going to talk about some weird stuff today. And I would like to mention here too, everybody needs to have a pencil and a piece of paper because we're going to be doing a little activity not too long from now. So today, what are we going to talk about? Hopefully everybody's back from the break here. Just random stuff. Washington's influence on Hollywood. By Washington, I mean the United States government, conspiracy theories, and AI. Believe it or not, all of these things are connected, at least for the next 30 minutes or so. And by the way, if you have questions, feel free to stop me at any time, or comments or concerns, chat, etc. This is a pretty relaxed event today. And again, they may all seem unrelated. They all come together. First, forgot about this part. We're going to watch a video from Al Jazeera about the U.S. government influence in Hollywood. I'm going to stop sharing so I can pull this up properly. And it played earlier today, so it should play just fine now, hopefully. Okay, here we go.
Flood of accusations of sexual misconduct against Harvey Weinstein.
Watch any big-budget war movie or take in a spy thriller, and you could walk away not knowing just how much your movie experience was shaped by the Pentagon or CIA. However, a trove of official documents obtained under U.S. Freedom of Information laws and published this year detail the dealings between filmmakers and intelligence officials at Langley, Virginia, the CIA headquarters.
Probably the best known are Zero Dark 30 and Argo, but they've also assisted the television show Homeland.
How do we deal with homegrown, violent jihadists?
They've also assisted Alias.
You work for the very enemy you thought you were fighting.
24.
Tell me where the device is!
A CBS series called The Agency.
Then he slit his throat.
They assisted a film called The Sum of All Fears, starring Ben Affleck.
Captain Jack Ryan, CIA.
Charlie Wilson's War is a really good example where they maintain the idea that, are we really doing the right thing by arming the Mujahideen, the forerunners of the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization in Afghanistan in the 1980s? They kind of question that in a kind of jokey way, like the last caption in the film Charlie Wilson's War is something like, we came, we saw, but then we mucked up the end game, or some joke, It's like, no, that's not what you did actually, and you know it because the original script and the original book that you base this on doesn't say that. You armed terrorists in a really horrific conflict. It's the whole organization behind it, at a systematic level. And that turned Charlie Wilson's War into this saccharine, benign movie.
Throughout the 1990s, the CIA worked with Hollywood very specifically on movies that portrayed the CIA as sort of a heroic force protecting America. Most of the movies were based on Tom Clancy books, actually. So you had A Hunt for Red October and that entire franchise. The lead character, Jack Ryan, is this like super heroic figure, and he's like constantly, taking down bad guys and saving America, saving the world from various threats, whether it's Islamic terrorism or the IRA or ultimately white supremacists.
Between them, the CIA and the US Department of Defense have had varying levels of input, from simply clarifying points for authenticity to actually writing parts of scripts on more than 1,800 movies and TV shows. When it comes to influencing filmmakers, shaping the story, the Pentagon is usually in a stronger negotiating position than the CIA. Because of the hardware at its disposal, it can shut down a movie before a scene is ever shot.
The Department of Defense is actually a much more powerful player in the entertainment industry for basically financial reasons. The Department of Defense has expensive toys. They have submarines, they have aircraft carriers, they have tanks, and they have the personnel to operate each of those things. So if a filmmaker wants to make a war movie, they often will approach the Department of Defense and basically ask to borrow that equipment. And the Department of Defense will say, maybe, but can I see your script? And they will either say, this is great, we love the way that the military is portrayed in this, we will go ahead and collaborate with you. Or they may say, we hate the way that we're portrayed and refuse to participate.
When the Pentagon does agree to support a film, there can be some scripting strings attached. And the Vietnam War is clearly a sore point. In The Hulk, a reference to a US operation that poisoned Vietnamese farmland was removed. And in the Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies, a suggestion that the US did not win the war was cut out. In Iron Man, a reference to soldier suicides was removed, again at the Pentagon's insistence. The CIA's presence in Hollywood is harder to detect. It goes back to the early days of the Cold War and was designed to counter a propaganda effort coming out of the Soviet Union. The CIA placed undercover agents in major studios where they monitored left-wing screenwriters and directors. This was at the height of Cold War paranoia, and Hollywood was under the scrutiny of the US Congress.
Is investigating alleged communist influence and infiltration in the moving picture industry.
The agency started influencing scripts. One senior executive at Paramount Pictures, working covertly for the CIA, described how, to counter what the Soviets were saying about the persecution of African Americans, quote, well-dressed Negroes, unquote, would be planted in certain films.
What happens in the 1990s is that the Cold War ends, and all of a sudden the CIA is left without a visible, viable enemy to justify its existence. If they were going to continue, they had to do something to improve their public image. And one of the responses to that crisis was to begin to work with Hollywood to convince the American public that, and Congress, that they were still worth being an institution.
In 1996, the CIA's Entertainment Liaison Office in Hollywood began offering free support to movies that featured the agency. Chase Brandon, an intelligence agent and cousin of actor Tommy Lee Jones, was the CIA's first liaison officer. He's credited as a technical advisor on a host of Hollywood blockbusters, such as The Recruit, starring Al Pacino as a veteran CIA officer.
Our failures are known. Our successes are not.
In reality, Brandon was far more than a mere advisor on The Recruit. He helped pitch the film to Disney, that eventually produced and distributed the movie, and was involved in the script writing.
The Recruit.
As another CIA liaison officer put it, Hollywood is the only way the public learns about the agency. Which begs the question, should the public be learning about the CIA from the CIA without even being aware of the agency's role in the production process? These issues became public with the release of one of the biggest CIA Hollywood collaborations to date, Zero Dark 30, a film about the search for Osama bin Laden.
You really believe this story? Osama bin Laden?
The Zero Dark 30 was a really unusual case, I think, for the CIA in terms of how it works with Hollywood. The CIA gave the director and screenwriter a lot of access to the agency. They bounced a lot of ideas back and forth, and they wanted to really kind of tightly control the narrative that this was putting out. It backfired, though, because very quickly after the movie came out, it was criticized for suggesting that torture somehow had played a role in the information gathering that led to the capture and assassination of Osama bin Laden.
Torture and the CIA's use of it, especially after 9/11, were already under investigation when Zero Dark 30 was released. The Senate Intelligence Committee wrote a letter to the production studio, Sony Pictures. They said, "We believe the film is grossly inaccurate and misleading in its suggestion that torture resulted in information that led to the location of Osama bin Laden." Zero Dark 30's director, Catherine Bigelow, eventually had to respond to the allegation that her film was making the CIA's case for torture. In an editorial for the Los Angeles Times, she wrote that critics were, quote, confusing depiction with endorsement. Torture was, as we all know, employed in the early years of the hunt. That doesn't mean it was the key to finding bin Laden. It means it's a part of the story we couldn't ignore.
That's more of a problem with the film industry and the creative industry. Total disinterest in the responsibility of the ideological products that they create. And this is why you can have a very liberal town full of very liberal or even sometimes left-wing celebrities and directors, but actually they create films that are very much in keeping with the American Empire project.
The CIA rarely has any kind of public credit that suggests that they had any hand in shaping the narrative of that film. That lack of transparency I find incredibly problematic, because it doesn't allow the viewer to be a smart, critical viewer.
How about this? Why don't they just have at the beginning of each film, made with the support of the Central Intelligence Agency, let's see how long the practice lasts then. Because it won't. Because people will look at it and say, oh, it's one of those propaganda films.
All right, that is from Al Jazeera. I think it's really important to know where the sources are coming from. Share my screen again and bring up this PowerPoint I got here. If I can get rid of this. Where did I? Hold on a second. Gotta move this here. Okay. And get rid of this and this. Too many emotional support tabs up today. All right, I'll put this down here in case anybody says something in the chat. So that's just one example of this. This is an article by The Independent. This is the title of the article. Washington, D.C.'s role behind the scenes in Hollywood goes deeper than you think. Oh, does it? How do you know what I think? But whatever, it's a headline. It wants you to click on it. So this report by The Independent establishes that the Pentagon has had an entertainment liaison office since '48. And the CIA established a similar position not until 1996. The Al Jazeera video makes it sound like, oh, it's because the Cold War ended. But really, it's because the CIA dissuaded representations of its existence throughout the 40s and 50s. They didn't even want anybody to know about them. They got kind of a late start in many ways then as a result. Also, an erosion of public support in the CIA and the government institutions in general. This sort of distrust started, I think, in the 60s, maybe earlier, but it continued through the 90s, and it really caused the government to push back on its image throughout Hollywood. So here's an example of this. Actually, the X-Files. I don't know how many people even know about this, but this was a huge hit in the 90s. They had a reboot like just about 10 years ago, totally bombed. Why is that? Partially, the X-Files was built on a distrust of government and governmental sources and information it was letting out, even though they were both FBI agents. And there was a deep distrust that sort of switched when 9/11 happened in some ways. The outpouring for support of the government and the military, it was like a light switch almost that happened. Suddenly everybody was flying American flags and we were behind the president, and W. Bush's popularity shot up to the, probably late 90s, I think, for support, something like that no president, I think, has seen since. So the whole idea that the government is evil sort of didn't work in the same way. Now, Dr. Jack Shaheen, one of the first videos we watched in this series was Real Bad Arabs, and he says Hollywood and Washington are sprung from the same DNA. He actually got that quote from Jack Valenti, who was the chairman of the Motion Picture Association, and he was also special assistant to President Johnson, who was the U.S. president after Kennedy was assassinated. His quote from a 1996 article is, "The fact too long in the closet is that politicians in Hollywood are sprung from the same DNA. They both deal in illusions whose machinations are oftentimes unseen by and unknown to the public." And that's us. We don't always catch things. Like the movie we just saw, for those of you who were around, Rules of Engagement. If we don't look at that movie with a critical eye, just for entertainment purposes, what kind of ideas are we imbuing without even recognizing it? And this happens with all movies everywhere. There's a book called The CIA in Hollywood. There's an article on The Atlantic about how the CIA hoodwinked Hollywood. And this article says, since the mid-90s, but especially after 9/11, American screenwriters, directors, producers, they've traded positive portrayal of the spy profession in film or television projects for special access and favors at CIA headquarters. And there are reports of people working at CIA headquarters and saying, oh, look, there's Harrison Ford walking around. And they say other people who have security clearances sometimes have to walk like this because they're not allowed to see certain things, but Harrison Ford can. It's a strange double dealing that's happening. And here's something else interesting that I thought I wanted to pull. Some filmmakers are too easily dazzled by consultants who offer swashbuckling tales from their clandestine lives. I thought this was interesting because just because the CIA was involved doesn't mean that what the CIA said was even accurate. Here's a specific quote from the Atlantic article. "I quickly learned that I could never, ever take what any officer or operative says at face value. They are hardwired to deflect, even off the record. Also, as underpaid and overworked civil servants, they frequently try to cash in on their experience. Almost always they inflate their role and their own involvement." And I see this in the university too, by the way, and many other professions. It's not just people who work at the CIA. Okay, so what? Who cares about any of this? Why am I even talking about this? How do you know that anything I just told you is even remotely true? Just because I'm giving this lecture doesn't mean I'm right. I think it all comes down to manipulation. I have this picture of Loki up because I love him so much and I love Tom Hiddleston, but he's supposed to be the god of mischief. I don't really like mischief that much, honestly. I don't like being manipulated. I don't like being tricked or fooled. I don't know anybody who likes it. And ultimately, that's what we're doing here with these lecture series, with classes. Higher education is supposed to prevent us from being manipulated, or at least recognize it when it's happening, when our emotions are being played with, when the music swells and we're supposed to feel a particular thing. If we're not watching for it, we don't notice. It's supposed to teach us critical thinking skills, ultimately. So, is anybody even listening? Shall we play a game? By the way, if you're in class with me to get credit for watching this lecture, you may have noticed in the assignments there's like credit for watching lecture. You have to do this, okay? Get out a pencil and a piece of paper and participate in the chat here right now too. And if you're not in this class and you're not here for credit or whatever, play along anyways, okay? Let's talk about bicycles. I promise this is relevant. Have you ever ridden a bicycle before? Tell me in chat. This is not a trick question, by the way. A lot of Arabs have never ridden a bicycle. It's just not a part of the culture, really. So a lot of people say yes, yeah, daily. A lot of us are kind of, especially in the United States, we're all sort of familiar with bikes. Okay, my next question is, on a scale of 0 to 5, how familiar are you with a bicycle and how it works? 0 being no knowledge of a bicycle whatsoever, or what it looks like what's a bicycle, to 5 being well aware of a bicycle. Like 3, 4, a basic bicycle. We don't have to talk about like gears and mountain bikes versus road bikes or what the difference is. I'll tell you, my husband, he's from Yemen, and he doesn't know anything about bikes and refuses to get on one for different reasons. But yeah, I'm sorry we didn't this semester watch the movie Wajda. It's all about a girl and her bike. It's just not really a thing. Okay, so here's the big question that I want everybody to do. We're going to take a little bit. Okay, here's a picture of a bike. It's incomplete. Just draw the rest of the bike. And once you're done drawing the bike, just email me the picture of what you drew. Listen, no shame here. I did this same exercise a little bit ago. It's from this book, by the way, called Suspicious Minds. I don't know if you can see me right now. It's the book is just complaining to somebody maybe a year ago now about why people are so gullible and why do people hold on to beliefs and why do they believe conspiracy theories? And this guy said, listen, you got to read Suspicious Minds. It really clears up a lot of stuff because everybody's fallen for a conspiracy at some point or another. 100% of us. Or have believed things we held to be so true that ended up not being true at all. All of us, whether it's memories or simple things you're told when you're children, like I believed gum stayed in your stomach for 7 years, stuff like that, to more important, larger picture things, like who won the 2020 election and whatever else. Anyways, to complete the bike, what do you think it might look like? And again, just send me, when you get the chance, a picture of your picture of a bike, which for most people, just for the record, is not going to be a functional bike. Okay. I want you to put in chat, which bike do you think works? Which is like the most correct one. I'll tell you. I just want to hear what you have to say first. And some of y'all are so worried about being wrong that you won't participate, even when points are on the line. The university kind of engenders this idea, by the way. We punish people who don't know and reward people who are silent, by and large. I hope that this class is taught you a little bit differently. Anyways, I'm not going to check the chat now, but the only working bike here is number 3, this one right here. Because if you attach anything to the front steering wheel like this, you're not going to be able to turn the steering wheel. If you put the pedals down here, you're not going to be able to reach them with your feet. If you put chains on on both of them. And so I didn't believe this, actually. I had to look up a picture of a bicycle. This is when I did this like a year ago. And I was like, oh yeah, it is just like a stick down here front and over here too. The point to doing this is that the truth is that many of us have no fucking idea how a bicycle works, even if we think we do. And by the way, I should have probably warned you I'm going to swear in this video because there's no other word that gets people's attention more. Anyways, who cares? It doesn't matter. By itself, that's not all that revealing. Who cares how much I know about bicycles one way or the other? That's not important. But what's revealing is that our understanding of how bicycles work for most of us is in a total illusion. When we are directly confronted with our own ignorance, like in this bicycle test, like how is a bicycle put together? It's actually fairly simple, but when confronted this illusion of understanding fades in theory. The idea is, I think I know less than I thought, which I kind of like this phrase because it involves thinking still. Maybe I don't know enough about this. Maybe I should know more. This ultimately is partially why so many people believe in conspiracies and things that just aren't true, even when confronted with indisputable facts. We know a little bit, maybe about something, bicycles, let's say. Somebody shows us a framework, it seems true. And the inherent flaws are then exposed. You know what? The bike actually can't run if you attach anything to that front wheel. But the illusion for so many people still doesn't fade because there are so many beliefs that are held as a core part of our identities. And this has happened throughout time and space and world history. Ideas that the world is flat, that the world is round, that there will always be somebody contacting me about my car's extended warranty. You know, things like this, like you just can't get away from them. Sure you can. Sure you can. There are things that we believe in that if we really have an open mind, maybe we can let go of just a little bit. So in theory, let's talk about higher education. This whole idea of what we're doing at a university, why we host these kinds of lecture series, it's predicated on this idea that a well-rounded education will expose us to new ideas, help us discover facts and truths, which are slightly different things. We get exposed to different ways of life. We learn how to see the world in a different way. It helps us communicate with other people. And the internet is absolutely strengthening these false beliefs too. I think about that when it comes to social media, because we talked a lot at the start here, or I monologued about, CIA and the Department of Defense's roles in Hollywood. You don't see the NSA as much, even though they're 8 times the size of the CIA. And there's other reasons for that. They don't have the tanks and stuff. But what about the internet? We're not seeing the same level, I think, of propaganda that Russia is imposing on the internet, or even China to a certain extent. Or do I just think this because I don't even notice it? At least, I mean, we're looking out for it in theory. In practice, I don't know. I've got another question for you. What are the 5, don't look this up online, okay? You can Google it, but I want to know if anybody knows what the 5 New Mexico Higher Education Department, or NMHED's 5 essential skills for general education are. Did you even know that there was a New Mexico Higher Education Department? Because they govern stuff that I do here. We have to, for gen ed classes, like what skills is your class assessing and how do you assess this skill? And for this class, this is an elective. It's a movies course. It's a online, what do you call it? A lecture series open to the public, etc. It's one of those bureaucratic things. So critical thinking, yes, that's exactly one. Math, they call it something else though. I mean, what would you like to see? Like, what are you supposed to be getting out of this education? This is the question. I'll tell you, it's communication, critical thinking, personal and social responsibility, information and digital literacy, and quantitative reasoning, otherwise known as math. Diversity was never a part of it. I mean, we kind of embedded it in personal and social responsibility, but I think they started this, I want to say 5 years ago, maybe. Not really sure. Do we feel like we're learning any of these things or have learned them at UNM? I'm just curious. You can unmute yourself or put yourself in, try to type in chat. I forgot my water bottle today. I have to drink out of this one. Yeah, no, yes. Community responsibility. I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. I think it does depend on the student and the program requirements. Because a lot of things are offered in this class, but are people taking advantage is quite another thing. I think this is where AI sort of plays the biggest risk here, because there's a shocking amount of people in this class who are just feeding the course into Einstein, which is an AI bot, and having it spit stuff out. And I can tell, but I'll only go after people who do it, obviously, because I don't have the time or patience or inclination to try to, prove that people are being idiots and giving away their agency or whatever. So I think I know less than I thought sometimes becomes I think I know more than I do in so many cases. I would agree to a certain extent, like the thing in chat here for the video, if we removed grades, things would improve. Some people do pass or fail, try to take pressure away from trying to get the GPA for their future goals. This is sort of what we do in our Arabic courses. We have, if you can do it, you get a 1. And if you can't, you get a 0 and you get 2 weeks to make it up. So, and then all of our tests are project based. But the sad truth is that people just sort of like do the bare minimum then. I think it has to be intrinsically motivated, but we also sometimes need that push, and what that push looks like is going to differ from student to student. So here, let's shift to AI here and the big questions surrounding AI, because for those of you maybe not in class or whatever, part of what we're doing this week was we're having AI write a movie review, and then we're writing our own review and comparing the two to see what the deal is. So what do we hear? Dystopian, Skynet. Yeah, you can take a horse to water, but you can't get them to learn. That's what I have to tell students sometimes. Like I can explain it to you, but I can't learn it for you. Somebody else told me that, and I thought that was interesting. Some people say too, when you use AI to complete an assignment, it's like taking a forklift to the gym. Like, what's the point? And I say, I know a lot of people who would love to take the forklift to the gym if they still got that A grade in the gym, whatever that would mean. Anybody else want to chime in with what they think of when they hear the word AI? I'm not looking for a specific answer, by the way. This is a personal thing. Tech. I personally think Terminator, because I grew up in the 80s. It's outpacing what kind of impact can be assessed. Yeah, I don't like the way they rolled it out. John Oliver, by the way, had a very interesting what do you call it? Like the John Oliver show, I forget what you call it. Anyways, he has a whole thing about AI. I'm going to put the link in Canvas, but you can also look it up on YouTube. Anyways, let's define AI. I sit on the AI committee here at UNM for the record, and the only thing the committee could agree upon is that we can't define AI, and not even that we could agree upon, because I personally think we should maybe define it and talk about what we're talking about before we do anything, maybe. Here's one definition. Artificial intelligence is the ability of machines to think, learn, and act like humans. AI is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, especially computer systems. It uses advanced technology to make human tasks much more efficient. One of many definitions. Here's a background to ChatGPT. I think it's important to know where we were so we can see where we're going, maybe. Started developing in 2015. GPT-1 was released in 2018, but not to the general public until 2022. And the latest update was April 2026. This is GPT 5.5. And here's some more background. It was trained on trillions of pages of text from websites, books, so forth. There's a lawsuit that they're trying to get together because ChatGPT ate a bunch of people's research and is spitting it back out without crediting people. And some people are upset about this. To form connections, ChatGPT ran for 300 years of computing time on high-speed computing clusters by some rubrics. So this slide, for instance, is in 2 dimensions. But ChatGPT, so they say, works in over 12,000 dimensions. And you can see like the word associations. And if you see this sort of word cloud here, that's one representation of how it puts ideas together to spit back at you once you put it into, I'm not talking about ChatGPT specifically, there's Microsoft Copilot, there's Google Gemini. It used to be Google Bard, but it didn't do so well, so they rebranded it to Gemini. And there's many derivatives of this, but ChatGPT is kind of the genesis of a lot of this. When I first saw this cloud, by the way, I stole this slide from somebody else. It reminded me exactly of a brain to a certain extent, like the structure and the format and the way that connections are made and that kind of thing. So yeah, Gen AI and AI. So this is the question. I think AI is things like Google Translate, which has used AI to just generate responses. But generative AI is when you ask a specific question, it spits it back to you, or when you try to have a chat with it and it's very obsequious and nothing you do is ever wrong. And it's some people are starting to fall in love with their chat bots and that kind of thing. So there's also the environmental aspect I would like to point out, which is to say that these computing clusters need fresh water to keep cool. It has to be fresh water. It cannot be seawater or salt water. I went to one AI event and they talked about possibly shooting data centers up into space to keep it cool. They ultimately decided that would be too expensive. So that's why they're not going to do it, not because of the environmental concern. There's also, by the way, here at the university, a perceived lack of support for students and instructors concerning AI and generative AI and everything else. Because there's a lot of people talking about the implications, the ethics, the flaws, the weaknesses, and that kind of thing. But there's very few workshops on how to use AI. I would kind of argue that there's actually a lot out there. We just don't know where to look. So the Center for Teaching and Learning, which is criminally underused by everybody at the university, has had many, many different workshops and webinars about AI and how to use it and everything else. And we don't hear about it because we don't go to their website or they don't advertise or whatever else you might want to say. I was told just to play around with it repeatedly, and I really don't like that because I'm the kind of person who sort of prefers guidance or help. There's master classes about it. You have to like sign up for them though, and I know very few students who are willing to do like go to an extra lecture, I guess. Some people are, but then it's how do you fit into your schedule? I mean, it's hard to know where to go and who to talk to, I guess. So it becomes, I think I know less than I thought, to I think I know more than I do, to I don't need to know anything because AI does it for me. And this is part of the problem with learning languages also. When we see this nationwide in the United States, the desire and the enrollments in language classes are going down across the board. I think there's this idea that the only thing you can do with a language is translate. And why would you want to do that when you've got Google Translate? My counter argument is always, I don't know, maybe to talk to people, possibly. We're going to switch gears again for just a quick second. And yeah, we've got some information in chat if you want to take a look. But yeah, Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator who he really influenced a lot of the world of education worldwide. And there's a Freire Institute and sort of trying to change the dialogue about what it means to be educated. He wrote a book that was a seminal work called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And one of his quotes that I like is, he said, "It is our ontological vocation to be more fully human. We have to learn how to be human. It's not something that just happens." And this goes back to the gen ed ideas, right? Communication, critical thinking, responsibility, information and digital literacy. How can you tell what's false and what's true? Quantitative reasoning, or just to be human, perhaps, is maybe what we should change all that into. Yeah, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's a wonderful book if you ever want to read it. I believe that AI actually can indeed help us become more fully human. And I'll just give you one example. In my spare time, I like to write novels and other things, and I enjoy it, but sometimes I get stuck. And so the other day I was stuck on something that I'd been thinking about for a while, and I hadn't worked on it in a while. And I was like, I'm going to feed this to AI and see what comes out. And what came out was horrible. And I was like, I don't like the way that they twisted this character and the words, and I'm going to rewrite this. And what ended up happening was I got unstuck. And AI helped me with this. Now, the mistake would be to have just taken that and tried to publish it or whatever, or pass it on as something good. It was not good. But it did help me, again, do something other than, I don't know, doom scrolling or whatever it is I spend my time on otherwise. So this is the question, though. Do you know who you are? Because I can recognize good writing and bad writing, or what I perceive as good writing, because I did the work to get there and I know what I like. But before I know what I like, I have to know who I am. Do you know what good is? What quantifies being good? What makes a good movie? Do we have to know about the culture? Do we have to know about the background? How much background knowledge should you have? Can you just enjoy it on its own? Do you know what you want? What are we doing here at college? Why are you in this class? Why are you sitting through this lecture? What do you want out of this? Any of it? Do you know why you're here? Not just here again at the university or in this class, but just in general. What's the end game? What's the goal? What do you want to get out of it? It all goes back to knowing who we are as people, because everything that we want might not be what another person wants. And how do we get there in the end eventually? Eventually, nobody's going to tell you what to do or how to get there. So I'll tell you this, if all you want is a diploma, then who you are is superficial. You're here, you should hopefully be striving for that knowledge that diploma is supposed to represent. And listen, I get it. I was a single mom and I was trying to graduate, and it got to the point for me where I was like, I just need that diploma. Okay, fine. Because that's what I knew who I was and what I wanted to get out of it. And I already gotten a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I just need this last credit. This person is standing in my way, whatever else. I'm not talking about that. Everybody's situation is different. But I had a student talk to me when I caught them using AI egregiously. And they were like, well, I'm like a balloon and people are just tapping me and I just go where they tell. We're not balloons. We have agency. You want a diploma? This is one thing I guess I was feeling snarky when I wrote this PowerPoint. You are the person who enlists in the Navy after watching Top Gun. Because did you know that U.S. naval enlistments increased by 500% in cities where Top Gun was playing in 1986? Actually, that's a lie. Enlistments only increased by 8%. Enlistments increased, sure, but this 500% statistic, by the way, you'll see all over the internet. That's ridiculous. That's an insane jump. No one movie could possibly do that, even to the most uneducated and lack of introspection people you have in the audience. And I know that because of qualitative reasoning, right? That's insane. I encourage everybody to Google this, by the way, and like the back and forth about like how much did enlistment actually increase. But really, ultimately, all of this, it goes back to this. Because the more you know, the less likely it is for you to be manipulated or to believe untruths. Whether it's your professor telling them to you, or the internet, or your mom, or your religion, and people twisting religion to further their own political, powerful, monetary gain, everything like this. And you can separate who you are from what you believe. So I know a lot of people who've left the Catholic Church because they're so angry about what happened with a Catholic sex scandal that happened. But is the sex scandal a part of Catholicism, or is it part of your belief in God? And where do you fit into this conversation? That's just one example. But to know things, to really know what they are, you have to put in the work so that when somebody talks to you, you can recognize maybe that's not particularly accurate. And then so we can see all of these things here. Washington, D.C.'s role goes behind the scenes. Al Jazeera, how the CIA hoodwinked Hollywood. The movie we saw, Rules of Engagement, we can maybe watch it with a more critical eye. Because again, if we know who we are as a person, and maybe what my own biases and prejudices are, when I watched this movie at first, I loved it because I was in the military and I recognized all the background stuff and the calisthenics and I don't know what else. And watching it, 26 years later, I'm like, hey, wait a second here. Like, I can kind of see a little bit more clearly how this movie is manipulating me into thinking that Marines are more important than, 100 Yemenis or whatever. For this class, every time we have every introduction, I write this. What is being stated or implied all throughout the movie? Are the movie makers and lecture guests impartial? Of course they're not. But how so? Did the specific language utilized affect your opinion? Because I feel like language and language usage is one of the last vestiges of bias we don't really acknowledge. So, but what about what essential questions could be generated? What did you agree with? What didn't you agree with? What did you learn, if anything? Because even if you didn't learn anything, what you might learn is how not to give a lecture, maybe, or how not to make a movie, or what kind of movies you particularly like or don't like, or what movies resonate with you as a human and why that might be. Why would this movie have resonated with me in the past? Why would it have ever resonated with anybody? I can point to specific reasons, but this isn't about me today. Yeah, major city. Okay. So, anyways, in conclusion, when we use AI to perform tasks for us, we are giving away our agency and our humanity. We're just feeding something, and especially things when it comes to opinions. Because while it's doing, it's aggregating other people's opinions. And I guarantee you'll be able to tell when somebody has an AI response to Rules of Engagement, let's say, because it'll be so saccharine. And it'll be so, by saccharine, I mean so supportive. And it'll come up with things that seem deep, but are really, in fact, superficial. We can detect, I think, when the CIA is more involved in something and how it's trying to get us to view things in a certain way, or whether it's a conspiracy. Maybe we might believe it because we want to believe it, but they might have that part of us too that is aware that, maybe this isn't accurate, or this movie is manipulating my feelings, or I can tell this movie wants me to root for this guy, but he's kind of a jerk. What's happening here? I have this picture in the middle of somebody with their arms open. Somebody told me once, if you stand and you open your arms, the space around you that encompasses your arms is what you know that you know. And the room you're in represents what you know that you don't know. But the entire rest of Earth represents what you don't know that you don't know. And I feel that sometimes university tries to expand what we know as opposed to the room that we're in, what we are aware that we don't know, so that we can learn more. I think expanding your room is almost more important than expanding the space between your arms, because then you know what you're not aware of and what you can look for in the future. And that is all I have to say about all of this. And that's why I want people to play around with AI this week and have it write 2 different movie reviews to see how it manipulates us and how we have been manipulated in the past, because all of us have been, to a certain extent. We're all at university. Somebody sold you this idea. Not that I'm saying it's a bad one. I obviously made it my career, so I like it. But that's a personal thing. That's all I have for today. This is our last lecture. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, comments about the movie? Yeah, go ahead, Clint.
There's so much I've been wanting to say. This is like a lot for me. So I was 10 years old when Top Gun came out in 1985. And all I wanted to do was be a Navy fighter pilot. And I also remember thinking at 10 that this feels like one long extended commercial for the military. So I saw both those things, you know, but it didn't prevent me from also wanting that at that age, which whatever. But that's just one piece. And then I think a lot about critical thinking and how we're losing it. And I didn't join the military. I've got a whole long funny story about when I went and saw the recruiter and why I didn't join. But as a good liberal, I find that with, like I said, with the internet, it used to be like people on the extremes were not using critical thinking. Like, and you could almost say, or maybe this was my perception of it, that people on the right especially were not using critical thinking. But now I'm seeing it across the spectrum. And I am by no means a supporter of Donald Trump. I've never voted for him. I hate the man. But I remember asking people during this last election when they would tell me, you know, well, I hate Donald Trump. And I would just ask them why. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't tell me. Nobody could tell me. And it was just like Orange Man bad. And I was like it really disturbed me. Like that nobody was digging to the next level, you know? I mean, sure, there's a lot of surface things we can point at, but I think it just speaks to your point of what we don't know, you know, or what we think we know, maybe. That's all.
Yeah, I think so too. And like, or anti-vaxxers, the science is there and it's clear and it's obvious. And yet people will just choose to believe the opposite. And maybe we've seen the meme where it's, you know, like, would you inject this into your son? It's all like the chemicals, you know, rethink vaccines. So, you know, on the surface, that seems reasonable and logical. And there's reason, you know, if you make a new vaccine, you get a lot of money out of it. And people say, follow the money. And so if you do follow the money, it's why are we pumping all of these vaccines in us? What's the point? What good does it do? And on the surface, you know, it seems like we've done the research and it would make sense. But then you really look into it and you go to places in the world that don't have access to vaccines. And you see the victims of measles, the victims of polio, the victims of whooping cough, all these other things that were preventable that we have been insulated from by and large in this country. And so there's a larger world out there, not just literal world, but other ways of thinking. If people want more political stuff, by the way, this is a blog that I like. She puts out something every day just about. So how I start my morning is I'll read what she has to say. And I don't always agree with what she has to say, but at least she backs up where she's getting her information from and takes a historical perspective on it because she's a Civil War historian talking about what's happening in the United States right now and the sort of polarization of Orange Man bad versus Orange Man Jesus, or what, you know, this like sort of dichotomy we have. There's a little bit more nuance there. So I appreciate it. Yes. And I'm just saying, sometimes I just say yes to chat, but the people who are watching this video later are maybe not seeing the chat. We've been gaslit so much this past year, more than ever. And we question everything we know about our lives, questioning the government. You know, I don't believe any of these assassinations were legitimate, but instead political theater. This is what happens when you lie all the time. Not you, Sarah, but like when a politician is constantly lying, like Trump has been in the past. And this isn't just some liberal, you know, professor talking here or whatever. There's documented lies. And so how do we know that anything is true anymore? And that's part of the game plan, really, is if you keep shouting things loudly enough, people will just believe these lies. Or conversely, not believe anything. So it doesn't even matter what you say or do anymore because we're ready to, you know, just we disassociated almost. And I'm not saying that that's the correct answer either. I'm trying to focus lately on like internal and external locus of control. So what can I control? What can I do? What good can I create? Good based on what I think is good. I'm not talking about being nice, right? So like as good and nice are two different things. So, and then also external locus of control. I have a friend who feels very like responsible for what happened in Gaza. And that's just another form of hubris in some ways. Like no one person could have possibly stopped this. But here's a man who, you know, used to live in Israel and lived in Jordan and felt like he had this ability to communicate across the spectrum. And what happened? How did that communication break down? What more could he have done? What more could any of us do? What's happening in southern Lebanon right now? I don't know. And then a part of me is like, well, that's what they want us to think, that we're powerless, you know, and it can be very frustrating. And that's what frustrates me as an instructor, incidentally, when people come to me and they're like, you don't understand, my dog died and my grandma's in the hospital, and I couldn't possibly write a movie review without AI. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like you made some choices there. And I'm not here to judge your choices or who you are as a human being. It's important to prioritize your dog or, fine. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give you credit for something you didn't do. So Sarah says, I think we need more media literacy, tech literacy, back to basics. This may not be possible. People are exhausted. I believe it's possible. I believe it's definitely possible. I think what's going to need to happen, though, is a reckoning with, I'm not talking about UNM, I'm talking about higher education in general. The original higher education is sort of built upon like the priesthood and religions, because the original universities, a lot of them came out of the Middle East, but it was meant for studying religion and this sort of very patriarchal masculine structure. I'm not talking about Islam or Christianity or Judaism in particular, but many of these. And then to try to overlay this sort of structure onto, 2026 America, it doesn't always work quite that way. So somebody, for instance, has been told they're very intelligent all their lives, and they do really well at school, and they get all the grants, and they get all the professors, and they publish the right books, and then they get the prize, which is a tenure track job, as it turns out, at an R1 university, but it's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you get some crappy office in the humanities building that was torn down. And they're like, this is my prize. This is what I get after all this hard work. And we're getting paid less because every year, the premiums for insurance go up and we don't get raises, and people get a little bitter, and they're like, why would I want to change my teaching style? Why would I want to change my classes? I built this class and I should never have to change it ever again. I don't have to stay current. And the university in some ways supports this, because the university doesn't support good teaching. Or I think worse, doesn't really fire bad teachers. Or if there's bad teaching, let's say, the university, there's no real, I don't want to say punishment, because it sounds like we're all being whipped in some dungeon under the sub or something, but that's not the case. There's no real impetus for changing a course around. And I think that's a real problem. And that's, again, not a UNM issue. This is coast to coast, whether you're at Harvard or, Texas or California or anywhere. What's the joy of good teaching or positive teaching? I mean, this is what I do for a living and I genuinely enjoy it. But I'm shocked how many of my coworkers do not. They want to research, I guess, and teaching something I have to do. That's sort of my spiel about all of this. I get a little frustrated. I think that there needs to be, like, again, punishment's not the word I'm looking for. What am I looking for? Like, something along the lines of like a punishment if you don't put your course on Canvas, let's say. Oh, yes, and Francesca has a good point. It would be a game changer to have higher education be publicly funded too. Totally agree that college debt is incredibly harmful. I went to college on the GI Bill, and I still had like over $40,000 worth of debt that I had to sort of navigate. New Mexico, by the way, has passed a law now that says anybody who graduates, I think, has the right to higher education. So we'll see how that all plays out. The question is, why would professors stay in the United States if there are other opportunities in other countries that value them far more? Those jobs are few and far between, I would say. Disincentive is a good word. Thank you. I think that there are professors who are leaving, and I think that there are people who do want to move overseas, and I think they are, but the university system in Europe is even more challenging to break into than it is here in the United States. There's a lot of, I don't know, almost medieval things that you have to do. That sounds like, I don't know, again, torture racks come to mind, but like the publishing system and everything else is quite different.
Heather, do you know, I mean, I don't have any numbers to back this up, but what I hear or read in the media all the time is that less people are going for classical educations, or, there's no value in the current job market in it. Are the numbers actually showing that are people pursuing less liberal arts degrees? Are they?
Yes, I would say yeah. And I wish I had some like actual facts to back this up. Like here's a study that's showing this.
I believe you.
But part of the problem too is that everybody studied computer science. They're like, you need to study computer science, and I think that's the number one major right now that's not hiring. There's a cost of living in the U.S. If you're not in a STEM field, you'll not be able to afford living in the USA. To some extent, that's true. In other ways, no. Because I just had this editor job that was like maybe 120,000 a year. They need good editors still, and not enough people know how to edit properly.
But I think also the question is, why does your degree have to equal your job? I mean, people always ask me, they say, well, why are you getting a creative writing degree? What kind of job can you get with that? And I say, I have a job. I'm a bartender. It's a great job. I'm not using my degree for a job. I don't know.
You bring up a really good point, because I think there's this, I don't know, sort of timeline that Western thought is very timeline oriented, and it has to go like you're born, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids in this order, and heaven help you if you fall out of that order. It's, or if you go to college late, or if you have a child out of wedlock, or whatever else. We like to pretend we're a liberal society. We're really not, and in some ways. And there's always going to be people who try to stand in your way if you do things maybe non-traditionally, whatever that means. Yeah, so getting a degree for you, not for your job. I think there's a lot of value in higher education that we're missing out on, such as the idea of like learning how to think critically, learning qualitative reasoning, learning how to look at statistics and say, hey, wait a second, that statistic makes no sense. How is that even possible? And sometimes we do need that help. I think part of the problem, and listen, a lot of this is not fact or truth. This is Heather's personal opinion. I want to be clear about that. We've gotten so soft that the degree is starting to become more and more meaningless. There's this demand for intellectual rigor and everything else, and that we have to have difficult classes. Let's just take a look at this movies class. I'm asking for 6 hours a week, just 6 hours, and people can't do it. And they are cutting corners and they're cheating. And then the people fall behind. I'm expected in these last 2 weeks to catch them up on the last 14 weeks. And that's partially why I include the time management portion of this course, because I'm like, this is exhausting. I can't teach a special class for these 20 people. And that's the expectation now. And so I'm like, nope, time management is a part of this course. So if you haven't been able to keep up, it's like this idea. So it can get very frustrating for me, because we can tell students think they're getting away with stuff. They think that they're like pulling a fast one on us or whatever, and they're cheating their way through it. And I'm like, the truth is that if I want to drop you from a course, I have to have all this justification. I have to fill out all these forms. And I just don't want to sometimes, to be honest. And plus, too, sometimes, especially with as good as generative AI has gotten, it can be difficult to prove unless you specifically put as in my life as an AI, I can't have an opinion or something that's so egregious like that. And then, okay, fine, I'll fill out all the paperwork for you. But you multiply this across all the disciplines, and how easy is it now to get a degree? Are we really learning what we think you're learning? I mean, I hope so. And I tell myself, too, I can't concentrate on these lost sheep over here. I want to concentrate on the students who are trying to learn here, or maybe have a different opinion about things, or learn what it is to, like, what does a Middle Eastern film look like? Why am I not concentrating on that? And the answer is because I want to concentrate on everybody. But the point is that this is partially why I think that employers are seeing that a degree is not engendering the sort of grit and determination and willingness to learn an open mind that we like to pretend it is. And COVID has a part to play in this as well, I think, because standards kind of fell drastically. And then so you have these expectations that you'll be passed if you show up, because you're paying for things and it's becoming a consumer business. So you as the students are the consumers and we're the providers. And so if we're not providing what you like, then we'd better change it for you. And this is not the system that I came up in. So it's about managing expectations too, to a certain extent. But in any case, to get back to the point, I think this is partially why these degrees, why are they becoming less and less valued? And this is a part of it. And also too, it's propaganda, because we talk about a liberal arts education. People don't like the word liberal, and they think that we're in some kind of mind meld, all brainwashing students here. And I get so frustrated when I hear this, because I'm like, have you never been to a faculty meeting or any one of our committees? Nobody can agree on anything. We don't get anything done. We're not in some kind of mind meld together. And if I did have that kind of power to brainwash people, I'd get them to do their homework. Like, I wouldn't, like, that's it. I can't even do that much. So, but yeah, it's the word liberal that triggers people. Anyways, but that's the goal this week. We're gonna use our human brains to figure out what it means to be more fully human, what that looks like for us. And we should be using that every time we watch a movie. whether it's for pure entertainment purposes or not. I personally really enjoy some movies that are so laughably bad they're hysterical to watch. Because everybody, it's, my purpose right now watching this movie is to relax and turn off my mind. So yeah, I'll watch Iron Man or something. It's not exactly a deep film. There's nothing wrong with that too. But yeah, intentionality, I guess. So in theory, we've got about 6 more minutes. If anybody has any parting thoughts. I saw, by the way, the comment that we should have had this first. I didn't want to teach people how to use AI first because then some people will just use it the rest of the time, honestly. Community members are able to attend courses without formally registering or paying for the course. Yes, sometimes. How's that for an answer? This is supposed to be an open to the public community lecture series, but I'll be honest with everybody, I screwed up the QR codes that made it very difficult for people. Then that was 100% me. And also too, Francesca, I see what you're saying. Employment prospects are becoming grimmer. Health insurance is an issue. Low wages, hires. Yeah, there's a huge gap here. There's no company loyalty on either side because companies are not loyal to their workers or vice versa. You have to get lucky, I think, but you have to also be prepared when luck happens to you. So it's two things. And Clint, to your point about being a bartender, sometimes I wish I'd stayed as a bartender because I was making a lot more money. What courses are you teaching in summer and fall? Like for me personally, I'm not teaching anything in the summertime, but fall I'm teaching this course again. Although people are mad at me, they're like, you should have taught Arabian Nights, and then there's a reason why I'm teaching this course again. Because I don't need to get into why, I guess. But in any case, yeah, there are going to be different films because it's not attached to the movies of the the Middle Eastern lecture series. So I'll choose like a series of Heather's favorites. And I think if you take, I don't know how it works. Never mind. I take it back. I was about to talk about the differences in UNM credits and graduation and that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to because I don't actually know. They keep changing it.
Just speaking to the movie we watched today,
yeah,
which I hadn't seen since it came out, but I remember that last scene with the little girl with the gun. Well, and it was also in Real Bad Arabs, right? They showed that. Yeah. But I was thinking about, how CIA involvement, whatever. But, filmmakers have also found a way to do it without, Oliver Stone did Platoon, which, was certainly, not pro-war in any way or pro-military. Oh, and Stanley Kubrick did Full Metal Jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. They were both able to show, the realities. And then also I can't remember this film. I did see it, but I read the book recently, The Thin Red Line, which was amazing. Another one that, again, obviously no governmental influence, So I just wanted to say it is possible.
I think it was more possible in the past because of the way that the movie industry has changed, because of the way that the way that we consume movies, the margins have become much thinner. So you can't rely on box office receipts anymore and that kind of thing. But I agree. I think it's a bit of a cop out. Oh, we need the Department of Defense to, have these guns or tanks or whatever else. I mean, come on, use your movie magic, especially with like the way as good as computers are getting. You could CGI some stuff in there. You don't need it all. I mean, okay, I say that sort of tongue in cheek. We can kind of tell, but yeah, you can always make the movie you want to make, and if you can't make it, then make it animated or something. I think animation. That's one of the things I wish we'd have been able to talk about this particular semester is animation, because I think it's really underrated. And there's amazing things you can do with animation that you just cannot do with live action. So one movie is Waltz with Bashir. I'll put it in the chat here. This movie is phenomenal, and it sort of involves PTSD and flashbacks and of war and what happens, and the way that he was like trying to swim to safety, and this woman comes out of the water, and it's ethereal and all of this other stuff, and you can't quite film it in the same way, I think. If it wasn't animated, it looks like it's rotoscoping, but it's not. It's an interesting animation process. And that's an excellent war movie. But the person who was talking about Israel thought that it was too anti-Israeli, and another person who was supposed to talk about Israeli movies backed out, and so we didn't end up watching it this semester, for better or for worse. But that doesn't mean you can't watch it on your own. Yeah, well, without any further ado, I'm always available if anybody has any questions about stuff. I know I was going to stay after for somebody today, but other than that, thanks for joining all these lectures, Yeshavev. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot from other people this semester. I hope you have too, and looking forward to reading your movie reviews this week. Francesca, thank you for joining us as our community member week after week. We enjoyed having you here.